Today's episode is called Tuna Fish and Bending Metal. Now, this is probably the first video in history in which tuna fish has been mixed together with a masterful custom cycle. But as you'll see, the tuna fish can that is part of this story has just as central a role as the fantastic cycle that was built by Craig Rodsmith. Every collection, every museum hopes to have a crown jewel, a section or an exhibit that has no equal anywhere. Something that elevates the whole place to a different level. And our museum is no exception. Without question, our crown jewel is our custom collection, which we believe to be the finest collection of its kind on public display anywhere in the world. When the two curators of the famous Guggenheim exhibit from 1998, titled The Art of the Motorcycle, visited the Haas Museum a few months ago, those two gentlemen said exactly that our custom collection was unequaled anywhere in the world. And those guys should know. Inside our museum, there are over 50 custom masterpieces designed and built by the best of the best from all over the world. As you enter the custom shop, there's a plaque that receives barely any attention next to all the dazzling creations in the room. And you're going to see some of those creations as I read to you the inscription on the plaque that summarizes our feeling about custom projects. The plaque reads, "The urge to design and build your own motorcycle traces its roots to the desire of prehistoric man to depict a scene on the walls of a cave. It is the desire to create something unique, the longing to capture some form of beauty that has tingled your nerve ends and then raised the bar an inch or two higher. For the author who has been captivated by Shakespeare and then takes pen in hand, for the painter who has stared slack-jawed at a Rembrandt and then grabs a brush, for the sculptor who has no words to describe a Picasso but then digs his fingernails into clay, there is that itch. And the only way to soothe the itch is to scratch it, to try your own hand. And when you have the courage to do so, there is no such thing as failure. You have created something different, something that has no equal." My attraction to custom motorcycles, at least at first, had nothing to do with who the builder was or the mechanics of the motorcycle. I barely knew any of the builders. I still know very little about the mechanics of a motorcycle. It had to do with how the aesthetics of that motorcycle struck me within a second or two of seeing it for the very first time. And in this sense, it's reminiscent of my experience with National Geographic, where I always believed that my audience would make up its mind about my images within a second or a nanosecond of first seeing the image. And the first motorcycle that I acquired from Craig Rodsmith is no exception. I instinctively made up my mind about that motorcycle within a second or two. Let me show you exactly what happened then. And oh, by the way, the tuna fish is almost ready. It's still baking. It'll be out of the oven in a few more minutes. When Stacy and I were at the Hand-Built show in 2017, we were walking around just like I'm walking around today. And I saw the ambassador from this side. And I turned to Stacy and I said, "We're going to buy that motorcycle." And Stacy said, "You haven't even seen what's on the other side." And I said, "I don't care what's on the other side. It can be cardboard. I don't care. We're going to buy that motorcycle." I didn't know that it had a 1969 Moto Guzzi engine. I didn't know that it was a 1974 Moto Guzzi frame. I wanted this motorcycle in the museum. It was so staggeringly beautiful. Stacy and I arranged to meet Craig Rodsmith. We didn't even know who he was later that night when we first saw the ambassador. And it happened to be the first day that the ambassador had its feet on the ground in any show, period. It was its very first day. Craig had no idea anybody might be interested in buying it. I met him, a fellow from Australia, very nice bloke, and I said, I'd like to acquire that motorcycle. And Craig said, I'm not really prepared. And I said, well, prepare yourself. I said, we want that motorcycle. Do you want to sell that motorcycle? He said, yeah, I do. And I asked him, what price are you interested in? Craig had no idea. And I said, it's a magnificent motorcycle. It deserves a magnificent price. How about X? And I think Craig's jaw dropped. And he said eventually, yeah, that's a strong price. I think he stuttered just like I was stuttering. But it's what I learned about Craig afterwards that endeared him to me and that made Craig and I bond to each other as closely as we did. What I learned was at that time, Craig was basically dead broke. His electricity in his apartment in Chicago had been turned off. He had to borrow the money to haul the ambassador down to the show. And he was literally down to the point of sharing cans of tuna fish with his cat Nova. And I heard about this, and the impact of that story was just tremendous on me. It made me realize that every one of these custom cycles has a builder, a designer behind the masterpiece. And those designers have personal stories, and they're often stories of tribulations and setbacks and difficulties and health crises. And every one of them is not there for the money, they're not there for the fame, they're there for the passion. And in the 3 years since we acquired that motorcycle, we've collaborated now with Craig on 4 other projects. He's risen to the top of the world in terms of custom designers and builders. There's virtually no one in the world who follows motorcycles who does not know who this fine man is. And we've become the dearest of friends. We talk almost every day. We're very, very fond of each other. And now Craig does have fame, and he does have a pinch of fortune, and it hasn't changed him one bit. He still lives in the same Spartan apartment in Chicago. He still has the same simple shop outside of Chicago. He still has great modesty. He has that Aussie sense of humor. The biggest difference is that Craig is not sharing cans of tuna fish with his cat Nova anymore. And as a matter of fact, Craig may not know this, I actually communicate with Nova, and I just got an email from her, and I want to read this email so that everybody who watches this video is aware of her feelings. It reads as follows. Dear Bobby, we're on a first name basis. Things are just great here in Chicago. With Craig sheltered in place, I get to be with him more. And most importantly, I don't have to share cans of tuna fish with him anymore. Speaking of that, I think it's time for a little payback. Every once in a while, even though he's a tightwad, I think Craig could spring for a can of caviar that we could share. Craig, I think Nova has a point. She shared with you tuna fish. It's time for a can of caviar and for you to share with her.